Kyle here from allmereviews.blogspot.com. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Really appreciate that. I'm going to start doing, as I just finished the Fates Warning series, I'm going to do a series on King's X. This will be like, I guess, counting. Here comes Kitty Cat. You want to hear about King's X, Mocha? Yeah, look at Kitty. Look at the camera. Yeah. Marillion. Kevin Gilbert, The Deer Hunter, Fates Warning. So this is the fifth one. And I'm going to do a lot of these. I don't know. I think there's something to be said about doing them more thoroughly rather than just do a ranking. Some of these bands I want to do just rankings of. So this is King's X. So I'm going to talk about in this video my history, initially the intro, and then their first release when they weren't even known as King's X. They're known as Stink Preview, which, in fairness and to be brutally honest, I've not listened to that much. I'm not even that familiar with. I listened to it the other day. It's on YouTube. But so just getting into, like I said, I'm reading this book. Started reading this book by Greg Prato, and this will probably get me more. So like the Fates Warning stuff, more sort of in the King's X mood. It also kind of to celebrate, which I'll talk about obviously in a much later video, the new album, the first album in 14 years, Three Sides of One, from 2022. So I first heard about King's X, I don't know, it was the mid-90s. I want to say 1996. It had to have been. Yeah, it was. Maybe I'd seen their name once before. When I got into Dream... Yeah, okay. Got into the Rush fan in me, in the early days, the mid-90s of the internet, the Deja News groups, getting in and discovering Dream Theater sort of skeptically, and then talking about progressive rock and Rush fans, and they mentioned bands like Fates Warning, Yes, Genesis, King Crimson. I remember specifically. I have a printout of it on some paper, some printer paper, back in the mid-90s when I was at college, my first year at River Falls. And King's X, I think, was mentioned as a band or as an album by them. Probably was Gretchen Goes to Nebraska. But I think, I found Marillion was the one they actually got mentioned too. Marillion and then Dream Theater was the first two that I dove into. And then Fates Warning, I think I got into before even King's X, because it was the summer of '96. I was working at the country club restaurant I worked at, and I saw an ad in City Pages for one of their shows. I think it was July or August, and the first concert I went to from King's X was that summer. I have my concerts pull up. Nathan on Shuffle did a thing on concert. I was looking at my old concerts. Cool. I like his top 5 series. I should do something similar, actually. No. Let's see here. It was August 26, 1996, so probably sometime either in July or early August. And the singer had a mohawk. That was the thing that stood out about him. They were 3-piece, and I went to Cheapo in St. Paul. I remember specifically checking out some of their CDs. I listened to a couple, and I think it was Faith, Hope, Love, and I just felt like this is like Lenny Kravitz. Not really as good. I don't really know if I really like this as much. It's kind of like I'm going to say they were a poor man's Lenny Kravitz, but that's kind of what I was hearing. So I kind of blew them off a little bit. But I don't know what happened exactly. I talked to one of the chefs at the restaurant I was working at about them, I remember. Because I didn't work at that country club that much longer after that summer of '96. That was like toward the end. But then I gave them another shot, and then I started buying some of their CDs. I bought them pretty cheap. I don't know how much it was back then in the mid-90s. And probably Faith, Hope, Love. No, I bought cassette tapes. That's right. I bought their new album, Ear Candy, which I'll get into. That came out in '96. I don't remember if it was probably out at that point. And then I bought at least Faith, Hope, Love and the self-titled probably on cassette tape. Yeah, that's right. At least those two. I might have found Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, and that I was starting to get won over by them. I wasn't able to stream or download anything back then. It was like really hard. That was the mid-90s. I didn't even have an internet connection I could use regularly at home. My parents was all dial-up. I didn't even know if I had internet at home. I was going to the library at some point. But anyway, so then I remember they were going to come here, and I don't know, that summer I'd seen Styx in Kansas in May. I wanted to see more concerts. I didn't have a ton of money, but I had enough money. I was like, I want to go see more concerts. I'd seen Rush as a senior in high school. I'd seen The Who, or I saw The Who later. I saw Boston and Van Halen. Saw Sting. So I was like, who do I want to see? It's like this band King's X. All right, I'll go see them. I already listened to some of their music. Yeah, by the day of the concert, I actually was pretty much a fan. But I remember specifically also going to the Cheapo in Minneapolis when it was a different location, I think, on Lake Street, but more further easter. It wasn't that far. They played at the Mirage King's X, which I think was off of Highway 55 off of Hiawatha, with Galactic Cowboys, who I'd never heard too. And then I went to go listen to them. And I know me sampled some Faith No More at that, because I knew Faith No More from the song Epic, of course. But I was kind of checking out some of these sort of funk metal, funk rock bands from the 90s. I remember going to Cheapo before the King's X show with Galactic Cowboys and checking out Faith No More and buying at least one Galactic Cowboys CD. And I had a tape of theirs too, and then I maybe bought a couple of King's X CDs that I didn't have. I found them. And then I loved that show. I actually have a video of that show. The encore, they did Goldilocks, which was, they had the crowd come up and sing it, which was not an unusual thing as I came to learn, but I thought it was really unique at the time. I mean, this is like the 8th concert I'd ever seen, so I'd never expect something like that. So, but yeah, I mean, and going forward then, and then Doug Pinnick shows up. I mean, I'd see King's X more throughout that 96 and the 97. I was just getting into their whole catalog, including their new album, Ear Candy. And Doug Pinnick shows up on Dream Theater's album, which was taking forever for me, because I was a Dream Theater fan since May of 95, and I was waiting for the new album. And Falling into Infinity didn't come out, until like October of 97. But Doug Pinnick is mentioned in Metal Edge. When I was reading the Metal Edge for news, we didn't get the news on the internet like we do now, obviously. Metal Edge magazine at Schindler's locally in the Twin Cities here mentioned it was going to be on one of the Dream Theater songs, Lines in the Sand, and he was. And I was like, yes, the band I like. And I was, by the time I saw that show, I remember telling some people, it's like, well, I'm not sure who my favorite band is, Dream Theater or King's X. You know, it's like 1-2, really, not Rush anymore. I was kind of moving on from Rush, kind of foolish with me thinking about it now. But anyway, so that kind of supplanted, and then I just followed them ever since. I mean. So, but little did I know, even when I checked out their whole catalog, I did not know they had an album that had been released and when they formed. They formed in 1979. Doug Pinnick, while they formed at that era in 79, and then their first album, their official album, came out in 1988, he met Jimi Hendrix, I believe, at Woodstock when he was like, whatever he was, 19. He was born in 1950, September 3rd, 1950, I was reading in the new book, in this book. So he was not a young guy. He was in a band, I think, in the 70s when he was like in his 20s. But he met Ty. They met in Missouri. He was from Chicago. Ty and Jerry were in Missouri. But they had, I think their first name was Sneak Preview, and they changed the name eventually to The Edge. They eventually had another member join. There's a documentary video that's been made called If Then or something like that. I forget the name of it. I have it on videotape. But yeah, their first like official release when they were known as Sneak Preview was a self-titled album that came out. I'm seeing different dates. I've seen 1983 on Rate Your Music, 1984 on Discogs. I kind of think I'm going with 84. And so I listened to this probably I've listened to it maybe 10 times. I haven't, not that many times. I want to buy it it costs a mint. It's hundreds of dollars. It's on vinyl, Sneak Preview. I'll put a little image here for this video, of course. And I like it, but it definitely does not resemble what they'd become. And that was kind of their deal. They played a lot live. They did a lot of covers. I have a bootleg from the early 80s where they were doing... they covered Rush. They covered The Police. They did The Police frequently. Their sound, I guess I would almost describe as closely at that point to like Cheap Trick. But... that was kind of the thing about King's X that they became. They're hard to really fully pigeonhole because they covered various styles, especially of rock music, but they're kinds of rock music. They were catchy, power pop-ish at points, funky. But this album itself it's more pop rock, almost overtly. It resembles, Doug's as a vocalist was quite different. He wasn't extending himself, he wasn't wailing that much. The song The Door sounds a lot like an early version of Goldilocks and Picture, which came out in Ear Candy. You can totally hear it. They use that. The other thing about this album is a few of the songs, including one by name, I believe it's You're the Only One, ended up on Black Like Sunday. Because Black Like Sunday was, in effect, a re-recording of songs from their early days that the fans always wanted them to re-record. So they came out in the early 2000s. So I would say, yeah, I mean, the highlights are The Door. I listened to this out of order the other day, and I forget which other one. There's a couple others that stood out. Inside Outside, and yeah, Together. I think that's the other. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. There's one song I think Jerry sings lead on. I don't. Ty does any lead vocals on this. It's mostly Doug. Otherwise, other yeah, actually, it says Ty does vocals on it, so maybe it's Ty. It sounded more like Jerry and Ty's voice. I kind of sometimes get mixed up at points. Later, not so much, but occasionally, even on the new album. But I think for what it is, it's fine. But it's clearly it was under a different name. They were a band that's still trying to figure out what they wanted to do. Like I said, if you kind of like Cheap Trick, that's the closest comparison. There's a couple of bands I was thinking of that, and it was in the early '80s when it was made, so it's understandable that they sounded different a few years later and they changed their name. So, but anyway, what's your take, King's X fan, on the sneak preview album, the debut album? I mean, one that I still want to acquire, but I don't want to, have to take out a second mortgage in the process. Someday maybe I'll find it. Just like I'd like to find some of the Kevin Gilbert stuff on vinyl, the Giraffe albums and NRG, especially the NRG album. But who knows if it'll ever happen. But I mean, I should probably listen to it a little more. Especially, I think probably right around the time when I do the Blacklight Sunday review, I'll revisit it a little bit. Because again, a lot of these songs I think ended up on Medium Man, ended up as other names on Blacklight Sunday. But thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and see you next time.